They laughed as they crossed the line, but when she pulled out her CIA badge, their smug grins turned to sheer panic. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and let us know where you're watching from in the comments. In the quiet expanse of Lake Merritt Park, Maya, a seasoned CIA agent, sought solace. The park, alive with families, joggers and children, offered a brief respite from her otherwise high-stakes life. She settled onto a worn bench, her paperback a simple escape, a way to momentarily disconnect from the weight of her responsibilities. Maya was calm, blending effortlessly into the serene environment, a stark contrast to the powerful, calculated mind beneath her composed exterior. However, this quiet afternoon was about to shatter. As she absorbed the peaceful rhythm of the park, Maya's sharp eyes noticed something unusual. A group of officers, overly casual and laughing loudly, walked toward her. Their energy wasn't that of dedicated officers on duty, but of bored men looking for amusement. Their attention shifted toward her, and instinctively, Maya sensed something was amiss. A quick glance at the trio made her realize they weren't interested in community policing. They were eyeing her, clearly searching for a reason to escalate. The officers approached, their smirks betraying their intentions. Maya, ever vigilant, remained unflinching, her book resting beside her as she assessed their every move. One of the officers, the tallest of the group, greeted her with a practiced yet insincere, "Afternoon, ma'am." Maya's eyes flicked up, her face unreadable, as she offered a polite, "Afternoon, officers. You enjoying the weather?" The interaction was simple enough, but Maya knew they weren't here for small talk. As the conversation continued, Maya remained calm, choosing her words carefully, not revealing any sign of discomfort. Her military training had taught her to remain poised, even in the most tense of situations. The officers' attempts to escalate the situation continued subtly. They questioned her about her book, insinuating things that weren't there. Maya responded with ease, never letting her guard down. She had seen this play before, bored officers trying to provoke a reaction. But today, Maya wasn't just another target. She knew how to handle this, and soon she would reveal her hand, showing them that assumptions, no matter how casually made, had consequences. As the conversation between Maya and the officers progressed, a sense of unease grew in the air. Their attempts to make casual conversation felt increasingly invasive, their words laced with condescension rather than genuine interest. Maya's patience was wearing thin, but she maintained her composure, her gaze unwavering as she evaluated the situation. She could feel the tension rising, not because of her actions, but because of the officers' underlying intentions. The tallest officer, Officer Jack Evans, leaned closer, his posture shifting from casual to more imposing. His tone, once polite, became tinged with mockery as he inquired about her background, insinuating that there was something unusual about her demeanor. Maya didn't flinch. She remained steady, allowing the silence to stretch between them, letting them grow uncomfortable in their own assumptions. She knew that silence was a powerful tool, one that made people question their own behavior. At this point, the officers had crossed a line. Maya could sense their growing discomfort, their casual approach giving way to a more aggressive stance. They were no longer interested in small talk. They were looking for a reason to escalate the situation. One of the officers, emboldened by Evans' lead, made a move that Maya knew was crossing the line of respect and personal boundaries. He casually brushed his hand against her skirt, an action that, while subtle, was unmistakable in its intent. Maya's reaction was immediate and precise. Her voice, once calm and polite, now held an edge of firmness. "Excuse me," she said sharply, her body language shifting as she stood up, her movements deliberate. The officers, once confident in their assumption that she would be easily intimidated, were caught off guard. Maya wasn't just defending her personal space, she was asserting her authority over the situation. She wasn't going to let them make her the subject of their amusement. The third officer, who had been silently observing, raised his hands in mock surrender, trying to downplay the situation. But Maya wasn't having it. Her response was clear, her voice cold as she addressed them all. "Let me make something clear. Touching someone without their permission is never harmless." The officers took a step back, their earlier bravado evaporating in the face of Maya's unwavering confidence. The park, once filled with the sounds of casual conversation, had grown silent, the onlookers now keenly aware of what was unfolding. Maya's actions had turned the tables. The officers who had thought they could harass someone without consequence were now facing a reality they hadn't expected. Maya's steady gaze locked onto the officers as the tension in the air thickened. The shift was palpable. What started as a routine encounter had escalated into a battle of wills. Evan's confident smirk from earlier had faded, replaced by uncertainty and an uncomfortable shift in posture. The other officers, who had once assumed control of the situation, now seemed to falter in the face of Maya's calm, unshaken presence. It was as though the roles had reversed, and now it was the officers who were on the defensive. Her words had landed, and she could see that they were starting to grasp the magnitude of their actions. This wasn't just a disagreement over a harmless comment. This was about power dynamics, assumptions, and respect. Maya wasn't just standing up for herself. She was challenging the very foundation of their assumptions. The officers had presumed that because she was a woman, alone in a park, dressed casually, they could treat her with less respect, as if she were an easy target. Evans, now visibly uncomfortable, took a step back. His eyes darted around, as if searching for an escape from the situation he had created. The other officer, the one who had brushed against her, seemed to shrink under the weight of her stern expression. His earlier arrogance had evaporated, leaving behind a sense of guilt that he couldn't quite shake. Maya, sensing the hesitation, wasn't about to let the moment slip by. She didn't need to raise her voice to make her point. Her words were precise, each one delivered with calculated restraint. "This isn't just about me," she said, her voice carrying an authority that was impossible to ignore. "It's about every person who's been disrespected or harassed, for no reason other than the way they look or the way they're perceived. That's the reality you need to face." The officers stood there, at a loss for words, their earlier bravado completely gone. Maya had made it clear there was no room for complacency in the face of injustice. They couldn't hide behind their uniforms or their assumptions any longer. And yet, despite the power shift, Maya didn't seek retribution. She wasn't looking to humiliate them. She was asking them to confront their own biases, to recognize the harm they had caused without even realizing it. Maya's presence alone, calm and resolute, was a silent but powerful force. The crowd, which had slowly gathered around them, watched the interaction with bated breath. They were witnessing something rare, a woman who not only defended herself, but did so in a way that exposed the cracks in the system. And as the officers began to retreat, Maya knew that this moment would resonate far beyond the park, leaving behind a trail of reflection and perhaps, just perhaps, the seed of change. As the officers slowly backed away, the park seemed to breathe again, but Maya remained standing. She had held her ground, but there was something more important at play now. It wasn't just about this moment, this confrontation. It was about the ripple effect she knew was beginning to form. The crowd that had gathered around them, their quiet murmurs still hanging in the air, wasn't just observing the situation, they were absorbing it. Maya had shown them that power wasn't just about dominance or intimidation. It was about owning your actions, recognizing the humanity in others, and respecting boundaries. She turned to face the crowd, her gaze sweeping over the onlookers, many of whom had been silent witnesses to the interaction. Some were still watching the retreating officers. Others had their eyes on Maya, clearly processing what they had just witnessed. It was in those eyes that Maya saw the spark, whether it was recognition, realization, or simply admiration. For the first time, the power dynamics between the officers and the community were no longer just about enforcement, it was about understanding. A woman, her expression filled with a mix of curiosity and respect, stepped forward hesitantly. "Are you really CIA?" she asked, her voice tentative yet filled with awe. Maya gave a small, understanding smile, recognizing the reverence in the woman's tone. "Yes," she replied simply, not needing to elaborate on the details of her role. "But it's not about my job. It's about what I stand for. It's about knowing when to stand up for yourself and when to demand respect, even when it's uncomfortable." The woman nodded, clearly moved. She looked over at her young daughter, who had been watching Maya intently, her wide eyes filled with admiration. "I want her to know that it's okay to demand respect. the woman said softly. That she doesn't have to tolerate disrespect just because of who she is. Maya's expression softened as she crouched down to the girl's level. You're stronger than you think, Maya said gently, and no one, no matter who they are, has the right to make you feel small. The girl nodded shyly, her lips curling into a small smile. As the woman and her daughter left, Maya couldn't help but reflect on the exchange. It had been a subtle but powerful moment, one that spoke volumes about the impact of standing firm in the face of injustice. This wasn't just about teaching the officers a lesson. It was about showing the next generation that respect isn't something to be earned through fear, but something to be freely given as a fundamental part of human dignity. The park resumed its usual rhythm as Maya sat back down, the noise of the world around her a quiet hum in the background. But something had shifted. The officers had walked away, their swagger gone, replaced with uncertainty. The community had witnessed an exchange of power, not through force, but through quiet strength, and the refusal to let disrespect go unchecked. Maya knew the world wasn't going to change overnight, but as she closed her book and stood to leave, she felt the weight of the lesson still echoing in the space around her. The quiet power of respect had been reaffirmed, and in that small park, on a warm afternoon, change had already begun. As Maya walked away from the scene, the weight of the moment lingered in her mind. She had never intended for this simple afternoon to turn into a confrontation that would ripple out into something larger. Yet, in many ways it had done just that. Her decision to stand firm, to call out the officer's behavior, wasn't just about personal pride. It was about something more. It was about holding people accountable for their actions, no matter their rank or position, and forcing them to reflect on how they treated others. The walk home was slower than usual, her steps deliberate, as she thought about the people who had witnessed the interaction. The ripple effect wasn't confined to the park, it was spreading. There were conversations taking place now, in homes and coffee shops, at work and on social media. People were talking about power, authority, and the right to stand up for oneself. But Maya knew that these conversations weren't enough. Change wasn't going to come from a single event. It would take time, persistence, and a deep, often uncomfortable examination of the systems in place. That evening, as she sat down to dinner, Maya's phone buzzed incessantly with messages. Many were from people she didn't know, expressing admiration for how she'd handled herself. Some shared their own experiences of facing similar treatment. Others simply thanked her for being an example of standing up against injustice. But as she scrolled through the messages, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that the true work was just beginning. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a text from her supervisor. "I saw what happened today. Are you okay? It's causing quite a stir." Maya sighed. Her supervisor wasn't just concerned for her well-being. This was about the fallout from the public incident. As an agent of the CIA, Maya had to walk a fine line between her professional life and personal actions. But today had taught her that sometimes personal actions could speak louder than anything she could do in the line of duty. The next morning, as she prepared for work, Maya thought about the woman and her daughter, the young girl who had looked up to her for standing up for herself. She realized that those moments, the quiet ones that seemed so small, could be the most impactful. The girl would remember that conversation, that moment of empowerment, for years to come. Maya could already see the seeds of change being planted, even if the world around her wasn't ready to fully embrace it yet. Maya's mind was set. It was time to step further into the arena. The real work had just begun, and she was ready to lead it, one action at a time. The respect and accountability that she had demanded from the officers were lessons she now intended to carry into every aspect of her life. She wasn't just standing up for herself, she was standing up for the very principles she believed this world needed to survive and thrive. The following days were a whirlwind for Maya. The media caught wind of the incident in the park, and soon her name was making headlines across the state. But Maya wasn't seeking fame. She wasn't interested in becoming the face of a viral movement. What mattered to her was the conversation that had started, the change that was beginning to unfold. The power dynamics between the officers and the community they were meant to protect had been exposed in the most unexpected way, and Maya had been the catalyst for that shift. Her actions had planted a seed, one that she knew would take time to grow. Change rarely happens overnight, especially when it involved deeply ingrained systems of power and authority. But Maya was determined to see this through. The forum, the one she had urged the officers to attend, had become a turning point not only for them, but for the entire community. It had created an open space for people to share their experiences, their fears, and their hopes for a better, more equitable future. Maya spent the following week speaking with various community leaders, attending meetings with activists and local politicians who wanted to address the issue of police accountability. Her phone rang constantly, filled with messages from people who felt empowered by her example. Yet, despite the growing support, Maya knew the real challenge was ahead. This wasn't just about showing up at rallies or making public statements. It was about creating lasting change, about ensuring that these kinds of incidents no longer occurred and that people were held accountable for their actions. One morning, a week after the park incident, Maya received a call from Elijah Daniels. His voice was steady but filled with purpose. "Maya, I've been thinking. We need to take this further. We need to create a platform where people can report these kinds of incidents without fear of retaliation." His words hit Maya like a jolt of electricity. It was a powerful idea, one that could turn this movement into something even bigger. The conversation continued, and Maya and Elijah began brainstorming a plan to create a public platform for accountability. It would allow individuals to share their experiences with law enforcement, their stories of injustice, and have those stories heard by people who could make a difference. They would work with legal professionals, activists, and tech developers to build a system that was both accessible and secure. The vision was clear. This platform would not only allow people to speak out, but would provide resources for those who needed help navigating the complex web of legal and social hurdles that often stood in the way of justice. In the days that followed, Maya felt a renewed sense of purpose. The path was unclear, the obstacles large, but her resolve was stronger than ever. She realized that standing up in the park wasn't the end of the road, it was just the beginning. Change would come slowly, but Maya had learned one important lesson. You can't create the future you want if you aren't willing to take that first step, even when it's difficult, uncomfortable, or even dangerous. The respect and accountability she had demanded that day were just the start. It was a call to action, not just for herself, but for everyone who believed in a better, more just world. The message was clear. Action speaks louder than words, and sometimes it only takes one moment, one person, to change the entire course of a community. Maya was determined to be that person, and she was just getting started. Maya's story is a powerful reminder of how important it is to stand up for ourselves, especially when we face unjust treatment. In today's world, we often encounter situations where our assumptions or biases can lead to unfair behavior. Whether in the workplace, in public spaces, or even during interactions with authority figures, the ability to remain composed and assert boundaries is crucial. From Maya's response, we learn that respect is non-negotiable. It's something everyone deserves, regardless of their background or appearance. Maya didn't just passively accept the officer's actions. She used her knowledge, calm demeanor, and authority to shift the power dynamics in her favor. This moment of standing up didn't just stop with her. It sent a ripple through the community, challenging others to think critically about their own behavior and the treatment of others. In life today, it's vital to recognize that standing up for your rights is not about confrontation, but about maintaining dignity and integrity. We should never let someone, no matter their position, cross boundaries we've set for ourselves. Maya showed us that accountability isn't just about holding others responsible. It starts with holding ourselves to a standard of respect and fairness. The key takeaway here is: don't be afraid to assert your boundaries, demand respect, and use your voice to challenge unjust actions when they happen. It's not only your right, but can be the spark for a larger change.